Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics show with myself, Jordan. Today we've got another awesome guest surrounding a bit of permaculture, and her name is Lauren from Western Australia. And today in the conversation, we touched on a whole bunch of things from I guess, the climate in WA and what it's like growing food over in Perth compared to Queensland, which I'm in here, and then the differences, and then how we can utilize some of that produce, how we can then take it into the kitchen, preserve it, and cook it, and turn it in some delicious dishes. And also then what we can do in terms of reducing our footprint and trying to really think about the environment and the things that we do every day for our waste and where it goes and how we can best turn that around to make it all work for us in the best possible way. So um, we'll jump into the conversation in a second, but I wanted to make sure, first of all, that you go and subscribe or follow the podcast. If you're finding any value from this, it's really, really awesome if you could go and leave a review or a rating, because that helps more people find these conversations and helps share this message to a broader community to help more people actually get into the garden and start doing some of these things that we're on about. So that would be really amazing if you could. Please go and check out Lauren at her Instagram, but I'll run you through all of that at the end after the conversation. So without further ado, let's jump in to Lauren from Lozs Permaculture.
Well, I think for me, sustainability is at the forefront of what I do, and reducing my footprint. You know, we as human beings on the planet, we all have a footprint. We all have an impact. So it was about reducing as much of Lauren as I could. You know, when we all pass, and so I've done lots of things in the sustainability realm along, throughout my life, and so that was really, yeah, what it was all about for me. And then from that came the gardening and the growing and the cooking and all that sort of thing. So it wasn't until, I thought, well, what else do I want to do in this space, that I thought, well, hang on a minute, permaculture is kind of not what I'm doing, but what I'm really, really interested in. And yeah,
Yeah,
went,
it is that closed circle kind of loop, isn't it? And
yeah,
like, as you say, reducing our footprint is like a
yeah,
really big thing that we need to focus on moving forward,
huge. Yeah,
because the amount of waste and plastic and, all of the stuff that's coming out of every single household daily is immense.
yeah,
And it only ends up in landfills and just in ways that isn't conducive to helping nature and helping our planet get better. So
absolutely.
yeah, so in terms of like your gardening um history, was gardening always something for you that was around in the family, or is it something you discovered as part of trying to be a little bit more sustainable and that kind of thing?
My mum is a big gardener. So she's into her natives, and is really big into that space. And she grows her own food as well. But it wasn't really until, I traveled a lot and moved around a lot in my 20s. And it wasn't until I had my own space and was a bit more stable that I wanted to, start growing food a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tricky to kind of make that first jump, or at least get over the first few hurdles of making quite a few mistakes,
Mm.
because when inevitably we try something in the garden, it's like just plant a seed and then you kind of hit up all these pitfalls and obstacles quite early on, and it can be quite disheartening to want to keep going.
Yeah.
Um, but I noticed that, like, from your profile and the things that you love is cooking the produce and taking that next step and kind of being a little bit creative with it, and
Mm.
kind of, utilizing what you're growing to then cook for yourself.
Yeah.
So how did cooking play a role in what you were growing or initially starting to grow and what you were deciding to then make and do with it?
Well, I guess cooking has been a huge part of my life. I've always loved cooking. And for me, the permaculture part comes into it because, I was composting and then I was using the compost in my garden and then I was getting this fabulous produce. And then from that, it was this nice little cycle of then using that produce to cook. And then, essentially it goes back into compost and the cycle starts again. So, yeah, I just feel like, there's so many things that I've cooked because I've tried growing new things in the garden. And then I'm like, what do I do? What do I do with
Yeah,
this? So researching what I can cook, and then, there's a little bit of waste and what can I do with that? And yeah.
I like that. That's really cool. Do you
Mm.
think that your decisions are in terms of like what you're growing, do you think that comes from what is easy to grow or what you want to grow, or is it what you want to eat?
Or kind of all three.
Yeah,
So
cool.
yeah, so some things it depends if I haven't grown it before. Um, I'll be like, well, that's a bit weird, or look at that tomato, or people go to nurseries and as do I, and maybe our local green shop and grab seedlings. But I would always go there and be like, it's the really common things which are great and easy to grow, but I want the weirder things. So yeah, so then trying to grow from seed and giving that a go, but also wanting to grow some things where I know that I'm going to get zucchinis and cucumbers and tomatoes and all that kind of thing. So, and then going, what can I do with all of this? So I really wanted to have an abundance of produce that I could cook and eat regularly.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about living in WA and the climate there, because it's very different to Queensland from what I've heard. I've never grown or lived in WA. I've actually never been to WA. It's on my list. But
Mm.
how do you find WA as a growing climate? And have you ever grown anywhere else or lived anywhere else that is different to that?
Yeah, so I'm originally from New South Wales,
Cool.
and very different soil there to here, very different climate. It's hot, it's dry, and it's sandy. So
Yeah.
I've had to really work with our environment. So in the gardening aspect, I grow a lot of natives that will work in this climate. So things that are endemic to WA, the common names like Calbarry carpet and Geraldton wax and things like that. And then in the growing food space, I compost. Compost is my friend.
Yeah.
So I've had to really nurture the soil to be able to grow food, really.
Yeah, cool. Did you find that it's easier or harder or just kind of indifferent to New South Wales? Like, is it certain things must be easier and certain things must be harder, I presume?
Yeah, I think, I know my mum has a problem with the heavy clay soils over there, whereas, here, I remember trying to grow some things in the in the garden when I just moved into my place, and oh my gosh, it was so tricky. So I didn't really I wanted to do it as organically as I could. I didn't want to put in all these synthetic products and, soil wetter and all the stuff that they recommend here in WA. So yeah, compost has just been my best friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing to highlight, I guess, for everyone. Like one thing that I speak about trying to achieve is um I guess inspiring people to understand that the permaculture cycle or the reduce, reuse, recycle kind of mindset
Mm.
can be done on any scale. So we've got
Yeah.
kind of these big properties that are doing it in where everything is closed loop, but you can also kind of create that at home in an apartment building. Like you put your little kitchen waste in something and
Yeah.
create some compost to then put on a balcony garden or something like that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your composting methods. I know there's like so many different ways. There's like hot composting and tumblers and things like this.
Mm.
Um, what are you what are you doing in terms of your compost? Like what's your process like? And
Yeah.
then have you got any kind of like major things that stand out that people need to be aware of in composting?
So I have a hot compost system. And the reason that I chose that was mainly because I don't have to turn it. There's no back breaking.
Yeah.
And I can get compost quickly. So there's no sitting it out to cure it for a long time. I'm throwing it in, I'm walking away, and I'm getting this beautiful compost pretty quickly. So, as a busy person who, I actually have some back problems. So, having this hot compost where I don't have to turn it was really, really great for me. So I have a small compost, like a kitchen caddy on the bench. Throw all my food scraps in there, and then that goes into my compost. Throw it in there, and I walk away. Um, I put everything in it, everything
Yeah.
that I possibly can, from old cotton t-shirts to,
Yeah.
I've made a lot of swaps in my household as well. So cotton dental floss so that I
Oh,
can
wow.
throw it in the compost. Even the paper earbuds that you get now, making sure
Yeah.
that I can get everything that is, either compostable, home compostable, plastic free, making sure those, all those choices. I guess every time we shop and we buy something, we're kind of making a decision and voting with those choices. So for me, it was about what can I reduce? I don't even want to get to the recycling stage. I want to pull back a little bit and see if I can compost and turn it into, this lovely free soil. So and then I just chuck it on my garden and I've got beautiful,
And
beautiful.
voila.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. I like how you said you're making choices with swapping certain products out so that they are compostable and you're not throwing them out. Um,
Mm,
something that I guess is a struggle for myself putting a product out. That's not kind of the main thing that I do, but putting out the product as a fertilizer,
mhm,
I wanted to have compostable packaging.
mhm,
But the problem is because there's so many microbes already in the fertilizer that are living and
mhm.
working, they are going to break down this compostable packaging so it doesn't store for
Yeah,
a very long time at all. So I'm hoping that people can reuse the bags and things like this. So
yeah.
that's kind of the thought. But every time I see someone that's doing something where they have a compostable pack or something like that, I'm diving on that because that's,
Yeah.
as you say, it's not, I'm not throwing tons of plastic out. Like there's barely
Mm,
any recycling that ever goes out. So it's kind
yeah.
of you're always trying to make those choices and as you say, it is voting for what you want. And the more of us that do that,
Mm,
we think we're not making a difference, but that is actually letting the companies know that it's
yeah.
what we want. The consumers will vote with their feet. So, is there any other things that you have like swapped out in the home or you've made choices on that are like notable ones that you want to share or anything that kind of really stands out? Because I wouldn't have thought of like the a couple of those things, it's just
Mm,
like you don't think about it. So, cotton
yeah.
t-shirts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things in the permaculture course that I did was, an idea that they give you is to do a waste audit. And I know that sounds, some of my friends are like, oh my gosh, my bin system at home. They think that I'm crazy. But I did a waste audit. And so in that, you're able to sort of look at what you as a person or a household produce as waste a lot of. And one of those things was the little essential oil bottles.
Yeah.
And I was using them all the time. And so I had this, huge amount of waste. So it was like, what can I do better? Or what can I do with that waste? So in doing that waste audit, that was one thing. But yeah, little things like the dental floss. I thought, well, hang on a minute, like I'm throwing all this dental floss in the waste. So just researching and thinking what can I use as an alternative. But another one is the hand wash and dishwashing liquid that you can use.
Yeah.
There's now these little sticks that you can sort of put in the water, and they're in compostable packaging. So that was another one. So you now no longer have a plastic bottle left over when you finish your dishwashing liquid or your hand wash. So
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of researching and thinking, right, what can I do better? That I have a lot of this waste. What better choice can I make here?
That's beautiful. And the idea of a waste audit actually pricks my ears because I think I haven't done something like that. I mean, I'm conscious about what I'm trying to choose, but in terms of like going through and having a look, hey, like what do we produce a lot of?
Yeah.
Um, like for example, I buy a lot of grass-fed bone broth and they come in these glass jars,
Mm.
but like they just now store things, so
Yeah.
they're just
Perfect.
they're being reused for other purposes. But it's
Yeah.
kind of like you really need to go through, like you say, and figure out, okay, what
Mm.
am I using and where can I make the reduction?
Mm.
Another thing you said about like the dishwasher tablets and soap and things like this.
Mm.
Um, Another guest shared how um, they were taught and brought up to not waste any water, and like things like if people have got grey water systems and things like this where you can take your shower water and whatever else and then repurpose that for use on the property in really dry areas
Yeah.
means that if you're making conscious choices with the chemicals that are going down into this and compostable things, then you're going to know that whatever you're putting on your garden is nice and clean and healthy and doesn't have any nasties in it. So, do you have anything like that? Any grey water, or like do you save water, or is that like because that's quite difficult to do?
It's funny because as a uni student, I used to always, I grew up in so many droughts in Queensland and New South Wales. And so it was always something that we just did as a family. You just, you have 4-minute showers and you collect your water. So yeah, as a uni student, I used to have all these buckets under the shower that would drive my housemates crazy. But I've actually, I don't know why, but I've just forgotten about it over the years, and I've just recently started putting a bucket under my shower. And as you're in there, you're thinking, hang on a minute, is this, face wash or my shampoo conditioner? This is going to go on my plants. So can I actually use this? And then making those swaps, and that's better for yourself and for your health anyway.
Yes,
But yeah, so I've actually just started using the bucket under
awesome.
the shower. And yeah, there's lots of, I think that's a really good one for if you are in a small urban space or you've got some pot plants on your balcony. If you're living in an apartment, that's one choice that you can sort of make for the
Yeah.
environment. It doesn't have to be this huge grey water system that you've connected to your house. It can be small changes that make a difference. Yeah.
That's really cool. I like that. And yeah, even like you say, buckets or just washing stuff, like you wash your veggies or you might wash whatever and like you said with being healthy for yourself, the stuff that you're putting on your face wash or whatever it might be. Like my wife is really good at going through and making sure there's no nasties in any of the products that we use. So everything is really nice and clean, which means that if I'm saving water, it's going to the pot plants and things that
Yeah.
are going to be clean as well. So um, let's take a little bit of a move into cooking and sort of utilizing the produce that you've grown. I know we sort of touched on that a little, but in terms of like, say you have a bumper crop of something, where you've grown a fair bit of it, and say zucchini season is a good example because zucchinis are just, they'll want, there's so many of them and they just come and produce and produce. And what are sort of not specific to zucchinis, but what are some of the techniques that you use to either preserve that or to find other uses for it? Or do you have like chickens that it ends up going to? Obviously, it goes to compost as well, but tell me a little bit about how you manage some of the produce coming into the kitchen.
So the freezer is my best friend. I freeze everything, and if I've got something, silver beet was last season. I had so much silver beet, and it grows so rapidly, and it was in my veggie pod, and it was taking over. And so I thought, what can I do with this silver beet? And so, I cooked it down, blanched it a little bit, and then I ended up freezing it. And I had silver beet for my soups all winter. It was fab. Um, so I freeze a lot. You make pesto with your basil, freeze it. Your kitchen scraps. So even if you have, I don't know, cooked something, you've got all these veggie scraps, before you put them into your compost, I actually make stock out of it. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so before it kind of gets to that compost stage, what can I do with it? And I know lots of people use those little scraps and they pickle them and all that sort of thing. Or, your potato peels, you can make, the chips, that you put in the oven and that sort of thing. But I freeze a lot to the point where in a single household, I still want, a big chest freezer because I've got so much in my freezer. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool. Have you done any in terms of like fermenting or anything like that? Have you gotten into any of that kind of thing?
Um, I've tried some pickling.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but I'm not hesitant, but I just feel like I'm not going to do it properly, or I'm worried about, I'd really like to do it, but I'm worried about, have I gotten it right? How long is it going to last? The bacteria like sitting on your bench. So there is a part of that where I'm just a bit hesitant to do it, a bit like canning, a bit
Yes.
hesitant. But dehydrating is another one that's really good. And I've recently, bought a yogurt maker. I eat heaps of coconut yogurt. So I brought a coconut, yogurt maker to make my coconut yogurt.
That's
So,
wicked.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's sorry. I was gonna say, I another guest on that was very good at fermenting and has these wonderful, wonderful produce of stuff. And I was sharing how my failed first experiments at doing, like fermented cabbage and making those types of things. And I had made so many of those mistakes because it's something that like fermented foods are so good for us. So it's kind of like I was like, oh, I want to jump in and start trying to do some of these things. And I made some probably fairly rookie errors, but it's it was encouraging to hear that like everyone has that kind of first start when you're trying something and you're going to make mistakes. Just like in the garden and growing things, it's never going to be perfect every single time. So you're going to lose some stuff,
mm,
but it can go to the animals or the compost. It's not
mm,
like it's a full
mm.
waste. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's on the cards for you on the horizon or not, but if
Yeah,
it
maybe
is,
I'll give it a
so
go now.
yeah,
Great
go
tip.
jump
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me again about cooking. So, what are some of your like, because obviously this is primarily gardening focused, but what are some of your favorite things to grow that are staples in your cooking?
Basil in the summer. I can't go through summer without basil. I love pesto so much. Basil's one thing. I think it's whatever I've got at the time. Summer you've got certain crops, and then winter you've got certain crops, and so I think it's making the most of what I get throughout the seasons, and then kind of storing it, preserving it as much as I can through that. There's sort of that hungry gap where you're not getting a lot of produce, and then doing the same for the next season. Um, Passion fruit is a big one for me. A lot of my friends love my passion fruits and my oranges that I get a lot of, and they're just delicious. So I try and use those in my cooking and preserving and things like that as much as possible. But honestly, leafy greens, I need to have them going all the time. And I'll even use chards and things like that for my salads if it gets too hot in Perth and I can't get lettuces or whatever
Yeah.
it is. So leafy greens are my staples. If I could just have that in my garden, I would be so
Be
happy.
perfect. That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool. I like it. And it is like I promote trying to eat seasonally, and as you say, it's really good to just be able to pick the fresh produce and use it when it is in abundance.
Yeah.
Um, but then we do have the technology to be able to freeze things and take what was in season into a season where it's not available. And the benefit of that is that it's not being grown out of season. So it's not, it has been grown in its, I guess, ideal environment. And then you're kind of freezing and preserving those nutrients to then take into the
Yeah.
next season. So, is seasonal eating something that's kind of natural for you because you're growing lots of stuff, or is it something you're really thinking about, consciously trying to eat what's in season, or how do you feel about that?
It's not until, it wasn't until I grew, my own food and had my own garden that I really thought about eating seasonally. And the things that were in season, quite often you go to the supermarket and you buy things, and then it's not until you grow them that you're like, oh, this is a summer crop or this is a winter crop. I had no idea that it was growing, at that time of year. Um, because at the supermarket, you can get it nearly all year round. So it is something that's important to me. And I love when I can make a dish and I know that, majority of it has come from what is, around that season. So if you're having a salad in the summertime and it's, cucumbers and some zucchini and tomatoes and whatever else you're growing, or yeah, so that is important to me. And I also feel as though the food is better for you. It's richer in vitamins and minerals because, if you're buying it from a supermarket, they snack free, put it in the cool room. Yeah, so I feel like it's healthier as well when
It
yeah.
is. It's
Yeah.
shown actually that, I mean, I won't be able to pull up the exact information off my head, but there are studies that show closer to prime ripeness on the vine or on the tree. If you're eating it straight away, that's when it's maximally nutritional for you. And I discovered that the apples, for example, that we see in Woolworths, Coles, or I should say supermarkets, they actually have probably been picked over a year beforehand, which is quite insane. So like when apple season is here, it's probably good to be eating apples, but they're not the apples that you're buying in the supermarket. They're from a previous year or probably from a different state or, you know,
Yeah.
who knows? Like so having access to local I guess farmers markets or things where you can access seasonal produce makes it, as you say, more nutritional for you and better
Yeah.
for you. And just like the paddock to plate or garden to plate idea
Yeah.
is just you're minimizing that gap. Like if you kind of look at the conventional, say you grow the apple on the tree, it then gets picked and stored for a while, it then gets transported to one place, it might get treated or packaged and then transported somewhere else, and blah blah blah, blah. The chain is so long. So when we've got our, you know, produce in the garden or something like this, and it's coming literally from off the tree and into our body, like that is the most efficient and nutritional way that we can be eating our produce. It's I think it's really important
Reducing
to
those food miles. Sorry, reducing those food miles as well. If I'm buying from the farmers in WA, I know that at least it hasn't come from Queensland. Or, if I'm
yeah,
buying
true.
bananas like from Carnarvon, it's better than coming from Queensland. So, yeah, reducing those food miles is also really important. But another example that you said before about buying it either from a supermarket where it's been, cold store for a year or whatever. I bought some cherries the other day from a supermarket, and then my neighbor gave me some from the farmers markets. The cherries from the supermarket I had probably 5 days before she gave me the other cherries, and they lasted longer than the cherries that she'd given me, which
Ah,
makes me think that what had they done to the cherries for them to last over 2 weeks? But the ones from the farmers markets that apparently there was the cherries just fell off the tree. It was the last one, so they had to get rid of them. And they were sort of, done within a couple of days. I had to eat them really quickly. So I would rather have that fresh produce that I know has come, supported our local farmers. It's fresh. than to have these cherries that are sitting in my fridge for 2 weeks and, not wonder, well, you wonder where they've come from and what's been done to them.
It's so true. You're very right. And the shelf stable stuff, like it's spray, it's all of these things that preserve it for a longer shelf life so that they can store it for longer and show it off for longer. I'm not sure if you've come across the Weedy Garden on YouTube. I think he put up a video where it had an organic broccoli and a non-organic broccoli. And then
Mm.
he did this soil cross section where he sort of buried them and watched them decompose. And the microbes and the worms and everything tend to go for the organic first. And I've seen this with, say, like if someone put margarine or versus butter out and that, they don't touch the margarine, like you can understand from what nature goes for
Mm.
is going to be better. And another thing that I brought up in a Q&A recently is the idea of bricks levels. I'm not sure if you've come across what bricks levels are. They are it's very new to me as well, so I'm just discovering it. But essentially it's the measure of ripeness based on the, I guess, sugar content in something. So it's originally used for grapes where they test the sugar content for its fermentability for what making wine.
Mm.
But I've just bought myself a little device to go and start testing the produce, and you sort of squeeze a little bit on this device and you can see and it gives you a reading. And the higher the reading, so the healthier it is essentially, um, you're getting less pest pressure because it's sending off these signals to say that it is in good health. And pests and insects are our waste disposal system in the garden. They're coming to clean up all the garbage. They're going for stuff that's out of season, that's unhealthy, that's whatever it might be. They're going for that. So if you've got maximally healthy, uh, I guess, soil and conditions and everything's in its right place, you're going to achieve these nice high, what we call bricks levels or percentage bricks. Is by someone called Adolf Bricks came up with it. But it shows to nature is what I'm trying to get at is that nature is showing us what is good and what is bad in the garden. So, like for example, my cucumbers just got absolutely smashed by aphids recently, and aphids are on the lower end of the scale, meaning they're one of the first ones to jump in. So it's quite meaning my cucumbers weren't all that great this season round. But in the bed next to it, I have eggplants and cucumbers, and those cucumbers are fine. They're not transferring over from one raised bed to the other, which is really interesting because, and this is what's helped me understand this, is because the soil that's obviously in the other bed was made up of nowhere near as good and as long, it wasn't built up over a long term as the one that is thriving. So it was really interesting to me to see how the pests are going for the ones that aren't healthy or the things that they do go for the things that are sort of better for them, which is really interesting. So
And then
um,
that lets you know what you need to do to that particular raised bed, whether you need to improve the soil or yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I think understanding these different ways in which nature kind of decides for you in the cycle,
Mm.
that helps us to be able to then make decisions in the garden as to what we can be
Yeah.
growing or what we can change and things like that.
And that's one of those permaculture principles is to observe and interact. So having a look in your garden, going, hang on a minute, there's something not right here with my soil. Why am I getting pests here and not here? And then knowing what to do about it. So
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's jump into permaculture a little bit in terms of what you've learned. And I know it's such a deep topic and there is always so much to learn. I haven't myself done a PDC, permaculture design course or certificate, but I've spoken to many people involved in permaculture. I've watched so many things and listened to so many things on it. Um, One thing that I notice, as you just alluded to, is observing is a big part of what's going on. And especially when you first arrive at a property or a place or something like this, and you're thinking about how your property can best operate for conserving water and the flow of water and rainfall and things like this, and sun and the positioning and things like this. Do you mind going through a little bit about how you approach that with the place that you're in now, or as opposed to some of the other places? Are there some things that you went ahead and kind of jumped straight into as like your primary focus, or, how did you attack it?
I've done a permaculture living course, which was sort of a taster whether I wanted to know whether I wanted to do the permaculture design. So it's definitely ignited, well, fueled the fire that was already there because I've loved it. So I've been in my place now for 3 years. I've bought my house, and when I first arrived, I loved it. It's a two-bedroom unit, so it has a little bit of a yard, but it's not your standard house block. So when I first arrived, I just noticed how there was an orange tree and a lemon tree, and that was it. I was sold. But I noticed how there was such a lack of life. There were no insects, like no insects. There was a bit of grass there, really sandy. Not much growing in the garden beds. So I really wanted to work with the soil, and living in, urban Perth, we've got a really low tree canopy. So it's hot, it's dry, and there's lots of sun. So I wanted to utilize that. And the first thing was the natives. So getting some natives in, because I knew that would work really well. And then trying to get as much shade as I could. So I've popped in a lime tree.
Cool. I love lime. It's so
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
it was purely for my gin and tonics, I must say.
Beautiful.
So I popped in a lime tree, and I've tried to plant as many shrubs and whatever as possible, and putting in a frog pond, and just trying to increase the biodiversity that wasn't in my yard, but trying to get some pollinators in, some birds, and I've seen an increase in wildlife. But that was really the first thing that I wanted to do, and so my choices were really around that. And I also have all western sun. So this window, that's the blind that's behind me, that is one of the first things that went in, but it is western sun, so it gets really, really hot. So trying to make choices around how do I reduce the temperature that's in my house and increase in winter, but how do I reduce that? So tinting windows and blinds and things like that, which I think is really important for, as a sustainability, reducing the energy bills, really, but also, working for the environment, and trying to reduce the amount of power that we use.
It makes your life more comfortable at home too, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So that were the main things that I did when I first moved in.
Yeah, because that is like often, we think of permaculture. Well, personally, my mind goes to like food forests and swales and like, all of these insane kind of earthwork. Well, not insane, but just
Mm.
bigger land, I guess. So like it's really nice to see how you can incorporate permaculture principles in a smaller scale in suburban kind of areas and things like this. And
Mm.
you're really thinking about what it means to have a complete environment with adequate sun and shade, and then water areas. So you've got in this frog pond, which brings water, and then water dwelling insects and animals, and even gives animals and birds some water and shelter and shade and things like this. It's it's something that I find a lot of people can take something from, is that even in a smaller space, you can still do something to kind of close the loop. Um,
Yeah.
what's next for you then? What are you like what's kind of something that you're, because we're always working on something. We're always trying to, get better. Nobody's perfect. Like, what's your kind of next step that you're thinking about or wanting to, wishing, or whatever it may be?
So something seems really small for some people. I would really love some chickens in my house. So I'm trying to work with the space and, neighbors and strata companies and things like that to see whether I can do it. I'd love chickens. But I think a really big thing is reducing. I think as time goes on, we know that the earth is warming up. Our energy bills are increasing. My house is getting hotter. So it's trying to do what I can in the environment that I've got to be a little bit more self-sufficient and yeah, really work with the environment because there's only so much we can do. We can use paper straws and we can, stop using plastic bags, but the situation is that it is getting hotter. And so, yeah, I guess trying to reduce the temperature in my house, but also increase that biodiversity. So, I'd love to put solar panels on. I would love to, do lots of big things to my house. So doing what I can in terms of the temperature, but also getting a little bit more political.
Yeah.
I think it's really about, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and protest, although protesting is great, but, making choices about where we invest our money, choosing superannuation companies that we know don't invest our money in fossil fuels, making better climate choices. So yeah, we can do things like that. So I think that is my next step because really, collecting water and recycling and all that sort of thing is great, but I feel as though I need to take it a step further and yeah,
That's
do something.
awesome. I love that because yeah, that speaks to me as well. Obviously, I'm vocal about all of the things that we can do and trying to encourage more people to start getting into these practices and making the transitions. I hadn't even thought about things like the superannuation and stuff like that. That's completely new information to me. So that's something that I'm certainly going to take away from this conversation. But more conversations like this where we talk about it and share what's good and what's not. Um, I think, as you say, with like the climate and the fluctuations that are going on. So like obviously naturally the earth is going to have fluctuations in climate, it's going to get hotter and colder and whatever. But we are having a huge impact on the earth and we want to make it a better place, not trash it. So so as you say, really researching and looking into where our money's going and who we're supporting and kind of like you don't, as you say, you don't have to go out there and be like ringing on the doors of all these big companies. That might not be who you are, but having a conversation to your neighbor or like you've just done, alluded to something that I had no idea about, then I can go and make a decision and I'll share that with more people and kind of having the conversation starts to deepen that topic and make more and more people aware. Um,
Conversations with, my parents who, um, I mean, growing up, we went on bushwalks and hikes, and I was taught to what you bring in, you take out, and we used to do Clean Up Australia Day. So I guess it's always been embedded, to look after the environment and do those sorts of things. But as I kind of went more into that field as I was growing up, I remember, comments being made to me like, oh, a bit of a tree hugger and all these sorts of things. But I was so proud because I heard that my mum and dad went to a meeting where there was all these politicians there and they were talking about what they're going to do, just local politicians, but what they're going to do for their area where they're living. And my mum said to me, not once did they talk about what they're going to do with the wildlife corridor and the birds and the plants, so I'm not voting for them. And I was like, oh, such a proud moment.
that's
um,
amazing.
Yeah, so having these conversations, even little bits, it just helps, whether it's someone going, "Oh, I'd like to grow my own herbs," or you saying, "I never thought about your superannuation and where your money's invested." All these conversations help, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I love that your parents pushed that for you growing up because my wife and I have a child on the way, which is very exciting. So that's
So,
something that thank you. So I'm starting to think about as how can I best, instill this in the next generation, not just for my own family, but for as many people as possible, and like bringing them up with the appreciation for the planet that gives us so much back. Like we're not just, taking and taking and taking. We've got to give back, or at least, you know, I guess like aid it in and work with it. So rather than against it. So it's something that, yeah, really speaks out to me. Uh, One thing that I wanted to ask you, I meant to ask you before actually when we were talking about growing vegetables. This is kind of a little bit of a sort of cheeky way to ask the question, but it really helps. What do you find is your most difficult and challenging thing to grow in the garden? And why? And then we're gonna go the flip side, the easiest one, and why.
oh, that's a hard one. I've recently started growing, oh, well, this last year now. I grew garlic and potatoes for the first time. Um, I mean, they grew, but they just weren't really big. So it wasn't that it was really hard to do it. They're quite easy crops. You just kind of pop them in and leave them. But, at the end, because they take so long to grow, at the end, you pull out your garlic and you're like, oh, is this
Yeah.
all? Or, your potatoes are really small. So, but I guess it's all about learning, doing it again. It's just a big experimentation. And so I went and bought a great big raised bed the other day, and it was my Christmas present to myself. And that is my potato and garlic.
Love it.
That's going to be the prime spot. So, yeah, it's not something that um, that isn't growing how I would like it to.
Yeah. Sorry, I got you back now. So
I
what
don't know
about
if
the
you're, yeah.
easiest one? What about something that's like you find just apart from probably basil was probably I'm gonna guess that might be basil might be one of the ones, but what's something you find super easy in your climate or in your garden?
I think the leafy greens, I find them super easy. And I feel as though if you're a sort of first time gardener, growing leafy greens is great because you can, you get it quickly and you can pick it and it keeps growing, especially the lettuce that you can't think of the word, but you can pick it and it keeps growing rather than
Yes.
just chopping it all off. Rocket and spinach and things like that. They're kind of, yeah, keep going. I found my cucumbers really easy to grow this season. I think cucurbits are great. They pop up quickly from seed. They grow quick. They give you lots. You get
Yes.
so much. Yeah, bumper crops. You get just cucumbers and zucchinis in abundance. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like the cucurbits. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm trying to get into a habit of asking everybody that because it's really interesting just to think off the top of your head what is really difficult, what's easy to grow, and then comparing it across climates because
Mm,
it just shares like, for instance, you saying potatoes and garlic, like not that it's, as you say, hugely like difficult, like it still worked, but just to kind of get the hang of growing really good versions of whatever you're growing, like
mm,
just sharing that then someone in a different part of Australia might have a completely opposite thing where they're really struggling. Like in Queensland, it's super humid at the moment. So like powdery mildew is just running rampant through everyone.
mm.
So we're struggling with that
Yeah.
for zucchinis and stuff like that and pumpkins and whatever else you're spraying the water on the leaves because there's a lot of rains. It's coming and just sitting there and not much airflow. It's yeah, it's hard. But that's a really, really cool one. Last sort of I guess a little thing I wanted to touch on was like the aspect of community for you. So, um, something that I try to encourage a lot of people to do is to source local, buy local, stay, within your local environment and your climate, but also getting out there and kind of interacting with your neighborhood or trying to have like local community gardens and things like this. Um, what is your community like in terms of how effective are they at thinking about these kinds of things? And what are some ways where you see that we could potentially try and, get out there for our community and bring that, like either sharing produce, for example, with your neighbors or swapping some stuff or going to the local farmers market? What sort of things are you thinking about, or what's it like for you in your community?
I'm naturally a little bit of an introvert. So the
That's
thought of
fine.
getting out there into the community terrifies me a little bit. But something that I actually thought of doing is, in my strata block, there's 8 units, and having a sort of like one of the little, like a seed library or a produce station where you can share things, even if it's, books and whatever else, but to bring everyone in the strata complex kind of together. And even if it's helping the older lady that's down the end and giving her some fresh produce because she doesn't always get to the shops, or maybe there is someone that's local that has a veggie garden and we could swap seeds. I don't know, because it could be in their back garden. So that's one thing I thought about doing. There is a community garden nearby that I've been meaning to go to. It looks amazing. So yeah, something like that, getting involved in community gardens. Um, yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's
they're
I think that's a really good thing that you shared there because um, naturally I find putting myself out there, for example, relatively easy, and not everybody's like that, and I'm very aware of that. So it takes certain individuals to kind of push these things in the community and kind of take hold, and usually that calls to them and sort of says, "Hey, like." I think I can do this, and they'll go out and do that. But what you said about like just starting within your complex and just with your neighbors. So like if you run into the lady down the end when taking your bins out or whatever it may be, you
Mm,
you have that conversation. You say, "Hey, I've just got a whole like, do you eat zucchini? I've got like a few zucchinis," and then you take over a couple of zucchinis. You end up having a little chat for 10 minutes, and you find something out, and then you can kind of start building that relationship. And whether it's just one-on-one from time to time, that's still building community, and it's still encouraging the sharing, the swapping, and things like that. So for me, I think what you said there, even though you might not find the calling to get yourself out there into the community gardens and really be like, "Hey, look at me, I can share all my stuff." Like
yeah,
it's still entering into that sharing and looking outside of yourself.
yeah.
So I
And
really
even
like that.
my Instagram that I've started, I've been able to link in with so many different people from Perth and elsewhere. But I've learnt so much. I put up a picture of my friend's fig tree and I said, "What is this?" And so many responses, how you can fix it, and I learned something yesterday. So even though you can have a social media presence or not, just having an account and chatting with people, I've learned a lot. Today I drove down to a suburb 20 minutes away and they gave me a comfrey plant and a
Amazing.
heat mat, like propagating, yeah, so little things like that. And then I gave them some eggplant seedlings. So yeah, I think if you are a little bit of an introvert and you don't want to get out there in your community, even just having Instagram or Facebook, social media helps us connect to people in a different way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super true. I complete that slipped my mind. I use that all the time, Facebook gardening groups and things like this, and jumping in and sharing it. Like that's so important. So yeah, like you said, if that's not your cup of tea to go out and be in person, then you can offer so much still online.
Yeah.
And talking of your Instagram, is there any other places where we can find you, or is that the best place for to send everyone? Because I encourage everyone to go and check you out and have a look at your stuff. So is that where we
Thank
can
you.
find
Yep.
you?
Lozs Permaculture. Yep. That's where you can find me, just Instagram. Yep.
Beautiful. Okay, perfect. Awesome. What a great conversation. Lauren is absolutely lovely, and I'm very thankful to her for her time. She's demonstrating that no matter what scale you are on, you can use permaculture principles and really reduce your footprint as an individual and try and really make a difference to the world we live in. Now, a couple of things. Obviously, the podcast is out regularly, and I'd love, as I said, if you could go leave a review if you found it interesting or helpful. A couple of other things. Remember, there's the free organic growers guide on my website. So if you are looking to make the switch into organics, I've put together a free guide for you, which you can find on the website, theshedorganics.com.au. Finally, the shirt I'm wearing today is a bit of a shameless and selfless plug for my brother's company, Friend. So please go and check out Friend Store online.com.au, and you can purchase yourself some amazing clothing as well. Uh, you've got to promote your family, so I've got to put that out there. So anyway, thank you so much for your time and your support of this podcast and everything that we're doing here at the Shed Organics. Hope to see you again next time on the next episode. Take care.